Hey art nerds, happy holidays and Merry Christmas. So for today's Advent entry, we have something really fun. I'm going to be using a hollow clamshell ornament from Michaels. I haven't seen these sold elsewhere, but you guys will probably let me know down in the comments below. Dollar Tree might have something similar. I know they do sell the hollow plastic ornaments, and I actually have some tutorials on those coming up soon, so keep an eye out for that. So this is part of my Paperchild Papercraft Advent series, so every day from December 12th to December 25th, so a little bit longer than your normal Advent calendar, I have a different printable papercraft activity that you can do alone or with someone you love. And for every papercraft activity, I include a line art that you can print and color, as well as a full color watercolor scan that you can print and assemble if you feel like. So the materials for this one are a little bit different than the materials I've used in some of the other Paperchild Papercraft tutorials, but I think this one turned out really cute, and in some ways this is the easiest one to make. The most important thing you're going to need for this tutorial is you're going to need that clamshell ornament, because it's really easy to get your illustration inside a clamshell that actually opens. So to begin with, we're going to start with our sketch, and today's Paperchild tutorial is a little bit different. It is a 3-in-1. I will show you how I draw, how I ink, how I watercolor, and how I assemble this Paperchild. So to start, I'm going to unwrap my Michaels clamshell and I'm going to trace it, and this is going to give us an idea of how much space we actually have to work with. And you're going to want to subtract about 1 millimeter all the way around to account for the plastic, because when we're tracing it, we're actually tracing the outside of the plastic rather than the interior circle, which is the size or the space we actually have to work with. And I'm going to be working in a Canson XL watercolor pad today. This is a cellulose-based watercolor paper. It's 180 pounds, so it's about twice as thick as most cardstock, so it's a pretty sturdy paper. And you can find this almost everywhere. Even Walmart has it, so it's a very accessible watercolor paper. So I traced my ornament, and now I'm sketching in a little Kara who's been crammed into the ornament. And my idea for this was that she's stuck in a cold world, because I wanted to use glitter like snow, and if you're trapped in a ball with snow, you're not going to be super happy about it, especially because Kara is a Lilliputian from Southeast Louisiana, and she's definitely not used to snow. So I'm starting by constructing the figure, and I have loads of tutorials on how I do cartoony figure construction here on the channel if you guys are interested in learning this. It is a super helpful skill, especially if you want to draw your own comics. Speaking of comics, I've got loads of tutorials to teach you how to make your own comics here on the channel. You can check them out for free. I'm super passionate about comics, and I want other people to see how amazing and accessible comic craft can actually be. And one more note on comics. The character crammed into this snowball here is Kara, the titular character from my comic 7-inch Kara. It's about a 7-inch tall girl living in Southeast Louisiana, exploring the much larger outside world with her human friend and her human friend's pet kitten Pancake. And most of the characters from 7-inch Kara have been featured as Paperchild designs or Papercraft illustrations for this Advent series. You have Tanner, we have a Naomi one coming up, we've got a Pancake, and of course we have Kara. So as you see, I start by sketching in, constructing the figure before I start really adding in the details. I try to capture the pose and the gesture first, and then once I'm satisfied with the pose, I can start adding in details. So Kara's wearing a long striped shirt, a scarf, she's got little shorts on, stockings, and boots. So you can imagine she'd be pretty chilly trapped inside this ball. So once I have it sketched out and I'm happy with my sketch, I'm going to go ahead and ink it with a waterproof and marker-proof brush pen. This is the Sakura Pigma FB, and fans of the channel, people who've watched my videos for a while, know I really love this brush pen, and this is the brush pen that I've been using to ink all of the other paper crafts in our Advent series. You can find this brush pen loads of different places, although I would recommend you don't get it from Michaels because they are very overpriced at Michaels. But I'll have a link in the description where you can order, hopefully, everything you need to do this tutorial along with me. There will also be, as I said, a printable line art in case you don't feel like doing the drawing, you just want to color. There's a printable line art in the description below, as well as a full color watercolor illustration in case you don't even feel like coloring, you just want to cut it out and assemble it. And if you're working along, I would recommend you work on something cardstock or heavier, so an 80-pound or heavier paper. So once I finished inking it, I'm going to allow it to dry, to cure onto the paper for about 24 hours before I even erase it. And then I'm going to use a soft white vinyl eraser to do my erasing, and that is less likely to cause ghosting. So here we have our sketch. And this was done with a harder lead and H lead. Those are just a little bit less prone to smearing. You guys can see it up close. It's really, really sketchy. I'm not worried about that because I'm going to ink it, and inking it is going to clean it up a whole lot. So you'll see there's a lot of construction lines in my drawing. Here are the inks with the Sakura Pigma FB brush pen. Again, one of my favorite brush pens. It's a close-up of the ink so you guys can still see where I traced the ornament. I haven't erased it yet. And then here are the clean inks. I've erased our pencil using a soft white vinyl eraser. So in the next part of this tutorial, I'll quickly walk you guys through how I'm going to watercolor this. I have loads of watercolor tutorials here on the channel. I am a watercolor comic artist, so I do both watercolor and comics. And the way I watercolor is kind of reflective of the needs that I have as a comic artist, needing to produce art quickly and consistently and efficiently. So I am using the Core Mini palette, but you are free to paint with whatever you want to paint with. If you are on a budget, might I recommend you paint with the Praying watercolors, Yarka Student watercolors, or even the Sakura Koi palette. And I believe I have reviews for all of those here on the channel, as well as reviews of lots more watercolor palettes if you're on the market for some watercolors. Now, I attached my watercolor paper to the chipboard back of another watercolor pad. This is a watercolor pad that I'd already used up. I saved the back because it does provide a nice, already pre-sized surface that'll just hold my watercolor paper in place and keep it from bending and buckling too much. You might want to secure it on all four sides, or you might prefer to use clips for this. It's really up to you and your preference. And I used blue painter's tape, blue crepe painter's tape. I applied it to my arm first just to remove a little bit of the extra adhesion so that it doesn't tear up my paper when I pull it away. For her skin, I used a really light mix of burnt sienna, and to paint the white on her shirt and her stockings, I'm using a really light wash of ultramarine blue. Now, as I need the burnt sienna to get darker, as I need her skin to get darker and to show areas of shadow, I'm just going to mix in more burnt sienna. Burnt sienna is a really great color in that it can shade from really light skin tones to really dark skin tones. It's a very flexible color, and it's one I highly recommend you have in your watercolor palette. So for her shorts, I'm using a phthalo blue, and I'm keeping the color palette for this really simple. I want it to reflect cool but Christmassy vibes, so I'm going with sap green and phthalo blue for the majority of the colors. And I don't know about you guys, but when I'm out in the cold, my face starts to get really red and flush, as you know, my body's working overtime to keep me warm. So I painted a flush across her cheeks, and I'm using the same phthalo blue to paint in her scarf. also want to point out that this video has been time-lapsed at various speeds for various things that I'm working on. I don't paint this fast. I don't expect you to paint this fast. And if you live in Southeast Louisiana like I do, and it's raining right now, you are certainly not going to paint this fast, because allowing your watercolors a chance to dry before you do further layers is really important for successful watercolor. So it may take you quite a while to finish this, and that's totally fine. I would say if you're painting and you live in a really humid area, maybe give yourself 4 hours. Most of that time is going to be spent watching paint dry. So maybe bring a book or read your favorite manga. So once our phthalo blue dried, I can start adding in additional layers, painting in the shadows. And I am so super duper sorry. My camera has got a mind of its own sometimes. I would have cut this, but I do a lot of the sap green painting with the blur going on. So we'll just push through the blur. Let's pretend that it's like hazy from snow or something. I don't know. So I'm using sap green for her boots, for the stripes on her leggings, and the stripes on her shirt. But if you're coloring along at home, you can use whatever colors you want to use. You can totally change her skin tone. You can change her ethnicity. You can change her race. You can change the colors of her clothes. It is up to you. Let your imagination go wild. Or you could even use this as a base and then redraw your own character on top of it and totally make it your own. When I create tutorials like this one, I don't expect you guys to follow everything I do. What I really want is to inspire your creativity and to show you guys that art is something that belongs to everyone, regardless of age or skill level. And I would love it if everyone made drawing and painting and coloring more a part of their lives. Aha! My camera has fixed itself. So you can see we did and then it does what it wants. Apologies. You can see we did a layer of sap green. When that layer of sap green dried, I went over it again with a more saturated layer of sap green, and then I allowed that to dry as well. And now I'm painting in Kara's hair using a really saturated mix of that burnt sienna. And this just gives you guys a little bit of an idea of how wide the range burnt sienna has. I'm leaving a lot of the white from the paper to indicate highlights in her hair. Now, you can only get so dark with phthalo blue, so I mixed in a bit of the Payne's gray from the same set with our phthalo blue to get a darker color. I also painted some phthalo blue onto her boots to start adding in some shade, because sap green is one of those colors that you can also only get so dark with it. Speaking of, I'm mixing in a little bit of burnt umber, so that's a really dark brown, with our burnt sienna to start working on developing the shadows of Kara's hair. And if you guys like my art, if you like my art style and you'd like to read my comics, you can read 7-Inch Kara for free at 7inchkara.com. I share it every Friday as a webcomic. If you're like me and you don't want to wait for comic updates, you can buy the first volume, 7-Inch Kara Volume 1, through the Natto Shop. You can also pre-order the second volume, which we kickstarted this year, and it is a beautiful, hefty chonker of a watercolor comic. I am super duper excited about it. You can pre-order the second volume through the Natto Shop, and I'll send it out to you guys as soon as we get our order. So I blended out the phthalo blue on her boots just a little bit so that it's not quite such a striking transition. It makes a little bit more sense visually. Now I'm going in with white gouache, and I'm using that just to add in some white highlights, like on her scarf, on her boots, on her shirt, in her hair. And what this does is this just adjusts the contrast a little bit, and it can add a little bit more visual interest. Sometimes with cartoonier art styles or with anime or manga art styles, you'll add white highlights to things that normally wouldn't have white highlights, or you might add a highlight in another color, like a neon or a contrasting color, just to draw interest and to adjust the color balance a little bit. All right, so here is our clamshell ornament. I was trying it out just to see if it would fit. It looks like it's going to fit, because wouldn't it be a shame to spend all that time painting something and then it doesn't work? We'd have to figure something else out, right? So once my watercolor had a chance to dry for 24 hours, I scanned it, and now it's time to assemble our Paperchild Papercraft. And if you guys are hearing me throw the word Paperchild around a whole lot, a Paperchild is just when you take your two-dimensional art and take it into the 3D world using a little bit of clever paper engineering so that you actually have 2.5D paper art, or kind of like a paper figurine. And the materials for today's Paperchild project are actually pretty simple. So the first thing I want to do is I want to cut away the excess paper from this. I'm going to save that for another Paperchild tutorial. I'm not really going to need it for today's because we are putting her in that plastic clamshell ornament, so we're not going to need to build a base or anything like that. But you are also going to need a pair of scissors. You may want an XActo blade, and if you're one of my younger friends watching this video, you're also going to want some adult supervision if you're going to use that XActo blade, or you might want to ask them to cut it out for you. That's really the best idea. You're going to want some popsicle sticks. You're going to want some double stick tape. You're going to want some single-sided tape. You're also going to want some large flake glitter. You could use smaller glitter. If you have like the fake snow, that would also work really well for this. And you're going to want your plastic clamshell ornament, and I'll try to dig them up online and link them down below. And you're also going to want some ribbon. So now that I have used a paper cutter, which you don't have to have, but I can't cut a straight line to save my life, to remove the excess paper, I'm just doing another little test to see how the clamshell is going to look. I think it's going to be a really cute ornament, and it looks like we did a good job with our planning in stage 1. It looks like she'll fit just right. But we're going to save that paper for another tutorial, and we're going to use just a pair of scissors to remove some of the excess paper that's still remaining, since with a paper cutter you can't really get, tight, nuanced cuts. So now that we've trimmed off the excess paper, we can go in with our XActo blade and do some fine cutting. So I've mentioned this in the other Paperchild Papercraft videos in this Advent series, but you can do what's known as halo cutting. With this one, you're going to want to be a little bit more precise with your halo cut. Halo cut is where you leave a rim of white paper around what you're cutting, so it's not as precise. Or you can do what's known as fussy cutting, where you very, very carefully cut out around the outline. We're going to be doing fussy cutting today, and that's going to mean she fits in our clamshell ornament just a bit better. So I am terrible with an XActo blade, so I used a pair of scissors to cut her out as well. If you have a nice pair of fine, sharp scissors, smaller scissors, those would be so good for this. I went out to Michael's and I bought a pair of embroidery scissors to help me with this because I couldn't find any small paper cutting scissors left. And the scissors I got are absolutely terrible for this. So that's why you see me using a large pair of scissors rather than a small, precise pair of scissors. But if you got a nice pair of small, precise scissors, use those instead. The cutting is the most tedious part of this tutorial, so if you have a die cutting machine like a Cricut or a Silhouette, that could be a great use for this tutorial. All right, so now we get to do the fun part, the assembly. It definitely is my favorite part. And you guys see our clamshell ornament. You see the large flake glitter. I believe Ranger makes a large flake glitter that works well for this, but you don't have to use theirs. You see some ribbons. You see our double-sided and our single-sided tape, and you see some popsicle sticks. You also see my scissors. So you don't have to do this, but I've been doing it for all the Paperchild tutorials, and it's just kind of to make sure that your paper doesn't curl up on itself with, say, humidity. So I'm using a popsicle stick and some double stick tape. I've cut down my popsicle stick and we're going to create a spine, and then we're basically just giving her leg area a little bit more structure, and this should kind of help prevent this from curling up on itself on really humid days. And if your double stick tape is wider than your popsicle stick, just fold it over and stick it back onto itself. So I used a small clean yogurt cup just to hold my clamshell ornament so it's not rolling all over the place. I put some glitter in to begin with, and then I placed Kara. To save you guys some time, I have a suggestion. I recommend you use your single-sided tape, you apply it to her back, and you use it to stick her to the ornament so she doesn't move unless you want her to move. Like if you create a design that's double-sided or meant to move around, that would be really, really cute. But I did not have that foresight. She is a single-sided ornament and she doesn't look so cute from behind. So I decided to tape her in place, but it took me forever to get to that point, as you guys will see. But with these Paperchild tutorials, a lot of it is trial, error, and experimentation. That's part of the fun for me. I personally don't think it's fun having like every tutorial go perfect every time. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but I think it's boring to kind of do a piece as a demo and then re-record it later on to demonstrate it. I think that often gives a more professional appearance since you know what you're doing and you've outlined any mistakes. And before I teach a class, I always do that. But it's not so fun for YouTube, so I'm usually kind of flying by the seat of my pants. And you guys will see me do a lot of trial and error, making mistakes and correcting mistakes. Like, I got to the point where I had even taped this one up. You should probably glue it if you have like E600 or crazy glue. Just put a little bit here and there around the end just to keep it from like popping open randomly or bursting open and getting glitter everywhere if it should fall. I couldn't find mine because we just moved and who knows where anything is. So I used tape sporadically along the edges, which means I had to remove my tape once I had the bright idea of like, oh, hey, you might want to tape Kara in place. So, you know, different artists have different work methods. Mine is not necessarily as precise as some people. I do like a certain degree of predictability in what I do, but I also like a certain amount of figuring things out as we go along and discovering new things as we go along. So sometimes the play part, the trial and error part is the most fun for me. So you can see this is where I figured out, oh, hey, Beck, you should use some single-sided tape and tape her into the bulb. And if you're a younger artist, you might want to ask your adult friend to help you out with this because it can be a little bit tricky and they might have a better idea of what I'm trying to explain to you. I'm sure I am not doing a super great job of explaining it, and I do apologize for that. It's a little bit difficult to explain when you're messing with clear things. So now I'm just using some of my single-sided tape just to tape the bulb shut. And here's another area where you guys are going to see some trial and error. So first, I'm using my thin organza ribbon to make a loop so that I can hang the ornament from the tree. This is pretty simple to do. You're going to want to cut it longer than you would think. I would say at least 8 inches so that you have 4 inches on either side when you loop it, and you're going to make a small knot at the end. And then you're going to thread very carefully your unknotted end through, and you're going to loop it so that your tied end ends up at the bottom and the loop end is at the top. Now you don't have to do it this way. You could just thread the ribbon through and then tie it off and just hang it like that. It's really what you're capable of doing. So I was going to use this glitter ribbon that I have from American Crafts to make a bow, but this glitter ribbon is way too thick to make a good bow. I used to use it for bookmark tails. It does not work well for bows. So what I ended up doing, fast forward, is I ended up using the organza ribbon that I used for the initial loop to tie that around the stem of the ornament and make a bow like that. And I time-lapsed that bit for you guys even more because, you know, it's a little funny watching me struggle with craft stuff, I know, but you don't need to see it in slow motion. So, tied a pretty ribbon, tied a pretty bow at the top. You don't have to do a bow. It would be really cute to glue like pine cones or a snowflake charm or bells at the top. Just kind of whatever you think is cute and whatever you have on hand would probably work really well for this. So this one turned out really, really cute. It required the least amount of paper engineering, but there's just something about her being trapped inside an ornament with some glitter that's just so cute to me. A tree of this could be really cute too. And that a lot of my tree this year has ended up becoming handmade Kara Paperchild ornaments. I've had a lot of fun doing this Paperchild Advent series with you guys. So here is my Christmas tree. I promise it's not actually this pink. It's a white tree. It's just got a lot of pink bulbs on it. And I wanted something that was fun and kind of candy themed. So here comes the most important part. Figuring out where we're going to put our ornament. You got to find just the right spot for your Paperchild ornament. I think I found a good one. You can see a couple of the other paper children from earlier tutorials, so I hope you guys will check out my Paperchild playlist if you're new, and maybe you'll find some designs that inspire you to try your own. If you do end up making your own or making one of mine, I would love to see it, so please tag me at Nattosoup, Nattosoup, so I can check out your art. But I really, really like how cute it turned out on the tree. I have so many ideas for these plastic clamshell ornaments. I probably won't get around to doing all of them in 2020, but hey, there's always 2021. And we have done so many designs so far, but I still have so many more to share with you guys. A new one every day until December 25th. You guys can imagine that took a lot of work. So I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you guys have a wonderful, safe, happy, and warm holidays. So happy holidays, guys. Bye.